Okay, we're recording.
Okay.
Last needs business.
I'll wait till you pass it first.
Yeah, there is. You probably do better on the test than people that didn't show up. So if you did it for 4 years, your answer was following up your tongue too.
Somebody just looked at
He plays grandma. Just get the hard job. I'm telling you, tell the people she gets you back.
Yeah.
All right. One daughter, 4 grandkids. My daughter growing up said she wanted to be the only child. Because that's what she said she was going to do. The life, baby. If they grow up. All right, page 4 would be a good place to start. But you already know that. Bottom of the page, the term follow-up. The last paragraph on the page.
Oh my God. That was hard.
That's just all of it.
Sharpshooter. That was cute. He's going to take it out so we wouldn't have day Thank you.
I'm not gonna get too close to hers.
I said to her, you're trying to take him out so we wouldn't have the exam.
Sorry, Ben has his life. Anybody else? Okay. What is follow-up?
It's what an associate.
When does, well, let me ask you another way. When does follow-up start?
After they purchase.
After the purchase. When's it end?
Never.
Never. Right answer. Are we okay?
Yeah.
Now, when I go over something and I say, are you okay? If you're not, stop me, we'll back up. And if somebody in the room doesn't like it, they can get up and leave. Because they didn't pay for your tuition. Well, you. Okay. The next one's on page 7. We discussed this a couple times. And that's the CMAs. I had you highlight one sentence, starting with line, I think 13 in the middle of it, says the CMA is a marketing tool. It may not be referred to as an appraisal. Why? Because it doesn't meet the guidelines that an appraisal has to meet.
There's that sentence.
Chapter 2. If I'm missing any stars, you let me know. Page 18, chapter 2, we'll just go to page 18.
And we got 117.
I don't have one.
No.
We talked a lot about, okay, 16, 17, when we talked about that, but none of them were stars. The stars, or not stars, actually star, is on page 18, where it talks about what different types of licenses. Broker, broker associate, sales associate. What's the difference between a broker associate and a sales associate?
Broker does have the license as a broker.
But working for another under the broker.
That's the difference.
Now, the difference is that they have a broker's license. What's similar is they both work for someone else,
Yeah.
Right.
or they're employed, shouldn't say work. Yeah, you understand that to be active, I simply have to have a registered employer in Tallahassee. I don't ever have to sell a liquor real estate. That's true.
That Knight Rider? Sorry.
You must watch the old show.
Yeah, I watch Starsky and Hutch usually like 3 times a week.
That car they had too, was a big deal, too. As a sales associate, what am I allowed to do on my own?
Nothing.
As a sales associate, am I allowed to take listings?
Yes. Under the direction of the broker.
Yes.
Yes or no? Can I
Yes.
take listings?
Yes.
Can I take them in my name?
No.
See, it's not what I can or cannot do. I basically can do everything a broker does. But I can't do it on my own. So when I put a contract together for a listing, I can do the same thing a broker does. I can even sign on behalf of the broker. That's not my listing. Worker bees. Question? Okay, on page 20, we talked about the fact that they do a background check or criminal, to look at the criminal history. What type of things, if they came up in your background, would not be an issue as far as possible denial of license?
Speeding, extinction, and traffic sign off.
Parking tickets.
Traffic signal.
Lines 2, 2, 3? Where you have a start?
What were you saying about the background?
What you got highlighted?
Or
They're asking you the type of things that would not cause you to not be accepted. However, feeding alligators would. Because feeding alligators is a felony.
But you can come food for that.
So they'd have been smarter if they'd just eaten hamburgers instead of so. Okay. 220. 2. Mutual recognition. Does that mean that if I'm in good standing in one state, the other state will allow me to obtain the license?
No.
Answer is no.
No, no.
I'm sorry.
I have to pass a 40 question exam.
Yes.
Whereas, because what I described to start with was reciprocity. That does not exist in Florida with other states. There are states up north where that is true. And the issue of the exam is the last paragraph on 22.
The last one. Yeah.
Question? Page 25.
What?
2-5. The gray box at the top of the page, the second paragraph. How long do you have to pass the state exam?
2 years.
Okay, that won't get you any points. 2
Valid.
years
2 years from
from,
the date.
From the
day
day
of
of
application.
appointment of the voting October.
from the date
You
that
apply.
the complete application is submitted. In other words, it starts on their time, not your time. Thirty-four. On 34, line 22, they talk about someone be given the power of attorney, which makes them attorney in fact. Which means if I'm appointed as power of attorney for someone, I'm acting on their behalf, which technically would, if it dealt with real estate, along with other things in the estate, technically I would be doing something that would require a license. But that's the whole point here. Most of these things, it's more about whether they, what kind of compensation they get, especially with the first and second group. It really, if they get nothing more than the salary, then the odds are they're probably gonna be exempt. If they get anything above the salary, the chances are they need a license. So it's a pretty simple decision. Just got notice today from Dearborn, the authors of the book, new edition coming out in December.
Oh, wow.
I told you it changes every year. As long as you stay in this business, if you want to be successful, you have to be educating yourself at every opportunity that comes available to you. I don't give it a webinar. Because this is a business that evolves. Typically, about 20% of the book is changed for many reasons. One, because something, the statute changes, or they decide to elaborate more on a particular topic. And of course, the division of testing and stuff, also reviews the materials, determine if they are covering the basics that they deem to be appropriate to get a license. All right, I'm on 46. At the bottom of the page, it talks about the composition of the commission. How many of them have to be unlicensed?
Two.
How many of them have to be 62 years or older?
One.
60, excuse me. Hey, once you get to 60, what's 62?
Every moment counts.
Yes, it does.
And I have a red pen.
Two unlicensed.
Every strike of that red pen counts.
Two unlicensed.
Yeah. You got to highlight the star beside it right there.
The way you say it, right.
Okay, on page 48. We know that the commission has 4 powers and duties. Executive, which is the broadest power they have to regulate licensees. Quasi-legislative, there's where they make the rules that implement the law. You read things in the law, and the law doesn't, it gives you parameters to be specific. For example, the 45-hour course didn't say 45 hours in the statute. The statute said that there's going to be post-licensing to be determined by the agency. For example, all the brokerage relationship disclosure forms that you saw, they're embedded in 475. Which means they cannot be changed by mortals. The start, I've got to start yet. The ability to give you a license or take it away is judicial or legislative?
Judicial.
Neither. It's quasi-judicial. It is not judicial. They are not a judge. They can't put you in jail. You can be put in jail for violating 475. They're first or second degree misdemeanors. But FREC can't put them in jail. You have one on page 50, decided temporary license.
No.
Page 52. No. It was a star in the previous revision. See, because now I'm gonna have to go back through this new version, match it up to the questions, and go back to the book again and put stars in. If I decide that I don't want my license anymore, can I just give it up?
No, you have to write a letter.
Right, I have to write a letter.
Well, to the
Yeah, well, you're right. To who?
BPR,
And what are you telling them?
that you're retiring, that you're not
Now, what the words they use?
willing,
Relinquishing.
no longer to.
You need to, anytime they put words in bold, you got, you can use other words. But what they're telling you is, these are the words they would expect to see.
Is that a star?
Yeah, it's a start. And notice it's voluntary. Top of page 52, the second bullet, starting at line 3. see, this is an involuntary. Involuntary means somebody else is causing, or you let it expire. This is the licensee deciding to give up the license. I have a suggestion. Don't ever do that. Ever give your license up. Do your post-license, do your continuing education, and renew that license. Because the week after you relinquish it, your first opportunity will show up. I've had people not finish not doing the 45-hour course. How do I know? Because they came back to start over again. Because guess what happened when they let it expire? Opportunity came along with one catch. Need a license. And since they decided they didn't need it anymore, let it lapse. Because you understand the first renewal, if you don't do that 45 hours and renew by the expiration date of your first license, you don't have a license. You get to come back. You get to do these 63 hours all over again.
Is that a month or 2 years or
Page 54. At the bottom of the page, we talked about multiple licenses, and on the top of the next page, we talked about group license. The multiple license actually has a star. But you really have to study one if you study the other. The star is the whole paragraph under multiple license. Who can have a multiple license?
Broker.
Does that mean that the broker can be the broker of more than one company at the same time?
Yes.
Yes. No?
What was the question?
Well, what would be?
Has someone looked up like-
Explain to me why, if I said here, you keep changing your answer. Because you know what happens when you get to the test? It doesn't say, hey, you got it right, go to the next question. That's gonna cost some of you a lot of points. I won't mention any names or point at anybody. But I will know come January. One way or the other. Either you show up for the 45-hour, or you don't.
You show up for the 63 hours.
Training first.
For those that don't pass the class exam,
Huh?
is there a review in January?
Yeah, you can send back to the class again.
Not the whole class.
Wait, y'all would, you would accept that?
Oh, huh?
You would accept it again? Because I don't mind paying
I don't
it
think he has a
if like
choice.
worse comes to worse, but.
I'm
on the pass is 7, so the answer is yes?
That's
Right?
yes.
No,
No, the answer, here's the answer. Pass the damn test.
That's what I'm
Don't
saying.
screw up my message now.
I'm talking about the question that you just asked,
Can you
about a
answer?
broker having more than one.
Yes.
Can a broker have more than one license?
Yes.
Does that mean that they are the broker for more than one company?
Yes.
Now, if you can't answer yes to this, you must have missed the orientation when Ben explained that he's the broker for about 18 or 19 different companies. So there's no excuse for you getting this wrong. Besides the fact, what's the first word? Which means
More than one.
more than one. And then the licenses is a plural. Here's what would happen. Every time we open up a new company, the company has to be created through the Department of State. We do LLCs. Then we come back and there's a form for the LLC to be registered as a real estate broker. And in order for that entity to be a registered real estate broker, there has to be a live broker that's a part of that company. So I have two applications. One for Ben to give him another license, and one for the company. As far as the sales associate with the group license, the likelihood of seeing that is pretty close to zero. Right now, we're not gonna get into it. However, it does appear that an answer with multiple licenses would be appropriate if you were talking about a broker having more than one company. Okay. Page 59, I'm sorry, page 60. If a buyer goes to a for sale by owner, do they do it at their own risk?
Yes.
And that term is referred to
Caveat.
caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. Up until the mid-90s, when all this agency stuff changed, buyers had no representation within the state of Florida. Because the law said that whoever paid the commission was who the agent represented. And 99 times out of 100, that's gonna be the seller. Now, that's not the rules anymore. Who pays the commission is not the dictating factor as far as who you represent. I don't know why I used the example of the buyer going to a for sale by owner. Seems like a good idea. Now, if they don't, if the person beside you don't get that, don't tell them.
71.
71? Okay. On 71, there's a paragraph that talks about record keeping and retention of disclosure documents. What's the magical number?
5 years.
Anytime they talk about maintaining any kind of records for any reason under 475, and you gotta guess, 5's a good number.
Chapter 5. Page 83.
Page 76. Do now. The whole page. Yeah. Those are all examples of something that would terminate the brokerage relationship. If a buyer withdrew their offer, would that also be an example of terminating a brokerage relationship? The buyer makes an offer, before the seller accepts it, they change their mind and withdraw from the offer. Would that be an example of terminating a brokerage relationship?
Yes.
No, it would be terminating a sales relationship, because the two people in that illustration were the buyer and the seller, not the broker. And that says brokerage at the top of the page. It doesn't say public.
So the answer is no.
Right. And when they ask you which of the following is not an example of the termination of a brokerage relationship,
But it's not an example of a brokerage.
yep. want to know that the answer is C?
Really?
I have no idea.
So would you-
My luck it will be. I have no idea.
Sorry, we're gonna proceed, Debbie, so we just not in a civil relationship.
Termination.
Termination.
We're talking about the termination of a brokerage relationship. A buyer withdrawing an offer would have nothing to do with the brokerage relationship. Buyer withdraws the offer, hopefully they stay with you and you find them another house.
Right. Because in the contract, it says that you're with them or
Yeah.
whatever it is.
On page 83, talking about office signs. What's the minimum that has to be on the sign? The broker's name and licensed real estate broker. We add one more if we have a business entity, like an LLC. That it. Do we have to put the sales associates or broker associates' name on the sign? If we do they have to be visibly separated from the brokers?
Yes.
And should their names be removed? Never mind.
The minimum, the question was gonna be the minimum.
The question gonna be the minimum brokerage license, what you doing?
The question's gonna be whatever the question's gonna be. You know what the answer is.
The brokerage firm and license.
Page 87. The first star is in the middle of the page where it talks about state regulation, and it indicates the agency within the state of Florida that regulates telemarketing. The Department of Agricultural and Customer. That was killed me. What the hell was farming have to do with that? I think it's because of the consumer services part of it. Am I allowed to contact by phone a for sale by owner if it does so because I'm representing a buyer who wants to see that home?
Yes.
No.
Oh,
You must.
Yes.
Yes.
My intent is not to get the listing. My intent is to service the buyer. That may be suggesting that the buyer doesn't want to buy this big job. Or it could be, yes, we want to make an offer. And I go back to the office and make an offer. Well, actually, we could pull around the street and I can make the offer and then go back and email it to the for sale by owner, have them sign it, have a fully executed contract. And on the way back to the office, I could contact the title company and forward the contract to them so they can get started with the closing. Used to be you had to wait the hour to get back to the office. And during that time period, your pager would go off and you'd have to go grab a quarter and stop at the first payphone. I thought about that the other day. People literally had cups full of quarters and a pager. Before the phones got there, the pagers were there. And up would come a number or a code put on by the offices had codes, certain series of numbers, and that certain thing.
Sorry, so before,
Of the agency that regulates telemarketing for them. And at the bottom of the page, the question is about being able to contact the for sale by owner. As long as you're doing it on behalf of a buyer who has some interest in the property, you can contact them. You can always knock on their door for any reason. Everybody understands that, right? It's not, I can't solicit them. It says I can't telemarket them. So any activity that would fall under telemarketing, I would not be allowed to do. But knocking on the door is not one of them. Sending them a postcard or a letter, not one either.
No postcard or letter?
No, you can do those. What you can't do is pick up the phone,
Unless you have a buyer.
unless I have a button. Page 9. Nine. You miss any of these escrow questions, suggest you find another broker to work for. Because I won't have to deal with you. Not a nice person when it comes to escrow. And after that seminar with the member of the commission, I'm even less tolerant. Of course, it's the same song and dance I hear every 2 years when we go to the seminar to renew my instructor's license. Between now and 2 years from now, you'll be the reason there's new shit they talk about. When we talk about escrow, what would be the first word that would come to your mind?
Money.
No? No?
Deposit.
No?
Immediately.
Immediate, thank you.
Oh, what is that?
Immediately.
Immediately. Immediately.
Now, for a sales associate or a broker associate, how do we define immediately?
The
Next
next
business
business
day.
day.
By the next business.
The same then.
No later.
By the end of
It's
the next business.
the day received, but no later than the end of the
Next business.
business day. What is immediately for the broker?
3 days.
3 days.
From when?
From
Yeah,
the
three business
three
days.
business days.
Make sure it says business.
From the time.
From the day they receive.
Who received?
Sales.
The associate.
Not the broker?
From the day the broker.
Why? Because everything you do is for who? So when somebody puts a check in your hand, it's as if they put the check in the broker's hand. I don't know about you. If you heard a tenth of what we talked about in this area, the last thing you want to walk around with is an escrow check. All right, that was page 90. 96 looks like another 94, 5, excuse me. 5, 95.
Right?
24. End of the line where it says FREC rules require broker to notify the commission within 10 days of the dispute if the dispute is settled. What it's referring to is number 4, which is where you ask the commission for an escrow disbursement order. Or in plain English, tell me what to do with this money. But between the time of you sending in that request and them getting back to you with an answer, the matter is resolved. Now, if you think about it, it makes sense. Wouldn't you have to let them know you fixed it?
Yes.
That's what they're talking about. So whatever it is, they're notified, which means they immediately do what? They stop the process of the escrow disbursement. Why? Don't need to, it's already been dispersed. if you have a dispute, or no, let's go to the top of, 96. The first paragraph. If I'm buying a condominium, do I have the right to withdraw within a certain time period?
Yes.
Yes.
How many days?
Business days.
3 business days.
To withdraw the offer within 3 business days, right?
No, not withdraw the offer. Terminate the contract.
Oh.
Assuming that the condo docs were given to them after they signed the contract. So anywhere from the first day they signed the contract until the day of closing, they have to be given those docs. If you wait until the day of closing, they have 3 days to decide whether they want to close. That would be kind of a stupid thing to do. But they can literally get up from the closing table and leave.
Ouch.
What if you forgot one document? Then they don't have all the docs. Which means when you take a listing, one of your first activities is going to be contacting the association or the property management company and find out what the deal is when we have a buyer show up. What is the owner's responsibility to the association? What's the buyer's responsibility?
Then, on 96, what line specifically is the star? All of it, 1 to 13?
1 to 6? I'm sorry, 1 to 5.
Yeah.
About 95.
Which line?
133, got a star next to it.
On what page?
95, 5.
I have a bracket that goes to the next page,
No star? Okay.
because the star is actually on the next page.
Yeah.
Right.
The star is a part of this 3 exceptions, but the star is the second one of the 3. All right, 98, 99. 1 star. Price fixing. In other words, when somebody says to you as a seller, well, what's the typical commission that the brokers charge here? And you say 6%. That would be a form of price fixing. Because you're leading the public to believe that everybody charges the same thing. What if it's true? Every listing in that community, as far back as you can go in the MLS records, has always been a 6% commission. Now could you tell them 6%?
No. Market price.
Well, market price has been 6% since 1928.
But that doesn't mean it's gonna be that tomorrow.
Oh,
No, it's
Okay.
6% and up.
just checking.
Wait, I'm confused with that one.
I'm
I'm sorry.
It was a trick question.
I got it. So, as agents, we can't say we get 6%.
Oh, we, yes. It's not we that's the problem. It's when you talk about the marketplace. Absolutely, we have to tell them what we charge.
Oh, so we just have to specifically talk about us. how
Say
we-
our
Right.
company charges.
Well, it's like any other business. I'm allowed to charge whatever I want to, as long as I'm not violating any, gouging. What I can't do is discuss what my competition does.
In general, what everybody, that 6% would be everybody
Mhm.
charging that.
So that is not a statement you can make. First thing you have to do is make it clear to them that federal law, it's antitrust, does not allow us to discuss what is the typical commission in the marketplace or what a particular company charges. All we can talk about is how much we charge. And I don't think you want to get caught with an antitrust violation.
And we can affirm if the customer says, makes a reference to that, right?
To who?
To us,
Yeah.
as agents. We can affirm their thinking. When it comes to the what the market.
Oh, you mean, in other
Like
words,
if
what
they're having a
everybody tends to
discussion,
charge?
right, if we're having a discussion and they bring it up, and they're not necessarily talking about our company, but what
Mhm.
others charge,
Mhm.
we can't affirm.
I just answered that question.
Okay.
You better learn that when you're asked questions that deal with some sort of law, whether it's state or federal, that is always your lead-in. So that they understand this is not company policy. Well, it is company policy, but it's something that applies to all companies, not just ours. And don't assume that the typical consumer understands that. Assume they understand absolutely nothing. I do that in class.
Well, thanks for your vote of confidence.
Yes, I'm right. You act like they know everything, and you assume they don't know nothing. By doing that, you won't overlook something. Yet, you won't offend them either by calling them stupid, even if it's justified. Okay. 100, bottom of page. Can we compensate the parties to a transaction? Come back.
Compensate the parties to what?
Is it legal for me to reimburse the parties to the transaction?
No.
If you're part of the transaction, if you're the seller or the buyer, yes, you can.
What if that same customer refers me a buyer 2 weeks later? Can I compensate that?
No.
Why? They are not a party to the contract. This is the same answer as before, no matter how you ask the question.
But just like you did for your daughter, but it can be known.
61J2, 10.025, paragraph 2.
Dale, could you repeat?
Page 100.
You got what?
Could you repeat the star 100, please?
Lines 35 to 41.
Okay.
In order for a complaint to be valid, it must be legally sufficient.
121.
What page? What page?
1, 2, 1. That's the 1. two in the middle, one at the end.
I had something on 119.
Now,
No?
now, we spent some time talking about the terminology, but no stars.
Oh, I have
I have a star as failure to account for the delivered.
No, there's no stars on those two pages. On 21, where they talk about filing a complaint and that it needs to be legally sufficient, that doesn't mean that it can't be anonymous. If you, in filling out, there's a form you have to fill out, there's information you have to give them. If you give them the information and they review it, and it looks like there's a possibility that there may be a violation of the law and the rules, they will set up an investigator to seek them out. Yes. They did that for a reason. A lot of people would not file a complaint if they had to put their name on it.
Page 175.
So 1 to 9?
In the first paragraph on 125, there are two terms. The first one's called a stay of enforcement. The second one is called a supersedious. Yeah, writ of supersedious. That's sort of Latin for supersede. So supersedious means that the courts are overriding what FREC had to say. By the way, the likelihood of the courts doing that is slim. And none. Probably closer to none. The supersedious allows them to issue a stay of enforcement. Page 126. Bottom of the page. 126. Bottom of the page, where it says administrative penalty, penalty. What type of penalty can the commission not issue?
Incarceration.
Incarceration. And civil. You can't go to FREC and say, okay, I suffered $500,000 in damages. I want you to tell the buyer to pay them. That I'd have to do work. The courts. So a licensee can be imprisoned for violating 475. Have to be careful how they're asking the question. Here they may be wanting an indication of the ones you know you can't do. The most obvious one of that group is what? Jail. Because FREC can issue penalties. $1 of them. On the next page, they talk about the notice of non-compliance. How long do you have to correct that notice? 15 days.
Which page are you on, sir?
Next page.
Page 126. 8?
128.
Should be the next page.
127?
The one you have started by the,
I don't have one.
18 to 17.
Yes.
where it talks about the fact that, anything that's a notice of non-compliance. A lot of the things that are non-compliant, you should be able to do by 2 seconds. One 34.
So these 15 days are not business days?
No. Rule of thumb, if it just say days, it's counted. If it's business days, it will say business days. Now, there are exceptions to that, there's always exceptions to everything. But if I'm guessing, because I'm not sure, and usually the more the days, the more likely it is it's calendar. If it's under 5, more likely it's business. Just, like I said, it's a general rule of thumb if you're guessing.
Page 134.
Right. There's a couple here. Question. First one. A licensee is convicted by the courts and the courts issue a compensatory damages. The broker does not have the capability of paying them, so they go back to the recovery fund to recover their money. If they touch a dime in that fund to cover something you've done wrong,
You're done.
what happens?
Once you pay it back, then
What happens? Your license is automatically suspended until,
Pay back.
pay back what? The money and interest. So yes, this could be a death sentence. Unless I can cough up that 25,000. This is the only thing that is automatic. No other penalties under 475 are automatic. But if they pay out of this fund, it's automatic, except for one situation.
So, in this case, I don't mind.
Yeah. But one activity regarding that fund would not result in automatic suspension. What is it? We said that if they take a dime out of this fund for something that the licensee did wrong, their license is automatically suspended, except for one situation. Escrow, disbursement, order. You ask FREC, FREC tells you to give it to the buyer, and you give it to the buyer, and the seller takes you to court and wins. So by doing what FREC told me to, I got nailed with damages, court costs, and attorney's fees. Will FREC cover those things? Answer is yes. But that's why there's a limit on what FREC will pay. Anything over 50,000, they would not accept the escrow disbursement order because they can only cover 50,000 per transaction.
Except for which one again?
In escrow. They can't take your license away when you did what you told them to. When you did what they told you to do.
And so if you get sued, then FREC will cover only up to 50,000?
That's all they can cover.
Okay.
The fund doesn't allow more than that amount per transaction.
So what happens to the difference if it's more? Who covers it?
Nobody. Which means they'd have to get a judgment against. But see, you have to, as the public, to get the money out of this fund to start with, you have to prove that the licensee did what he did. That was only within the last 2 years. And that they do not have the financial capability of repaying you. If you can't meet all those requirements as the public, you don't get anything. So it isn't just a matter of winning the court case and running to the recovery fund and say, give me my money. And the question regarding the issue of the broker, if they do an escrow disbursement order, is the fact that they will cover court costs and attorney's fees in addition to the damage.
But only up to 50,000, right?
Right. That part's not the part I'm concerned about. The part I'm concerned about is that you remember that they will cover court costs and attorney's fees.
Okay.
What lines are those, or?
They're in that second, the paragraph that says claim resulting from an EDO. Oh. Just a comment here. Cell phones are the best thing in the world and the most rudest thing in the world. If you've got buyers and you're out with buyers, or you're on a listing appointment, unless something major is gonna happen in that next hour or 2 hours, you silence those phones. Or if you have a situation like that, you're out with a buyer, but you got a deal closing this afternoon, and all of a sudden things blow up right before closing. I'm gonna tell the buyer that I don't normally do this, but I've got a closing that may not make it. I'm sure you can understand. So I may have to break away every once in a while and make a phone call. Hopefully not, but I want you to be aware of it. Because how many times I've watched agents basically ignore the buyer they're out with because they're on the phone. I remember when I sold our first house, one of the agents came in with a buyer, and that house was built in the early 70s. So you had the sunken living rooms, and you had the wrought iron as you come in the front door over to the dining room, kitchen, bedroom. And she said, look around, if you have any questions, let me know. And she's on the phone. I heard part of the conversation, yes, happy hour starts at 4 o'clock. I won't be there probably until 4:30. Now, at that point, I didn't have my license with a broker to be able to put it in the MLS. So I had a friend put it in the MLS for me. And I asked her if there was any feedback from this particular agent's customer. She said no. And the agent friend of mine said that that the other agent was complaining that the person didn't know what they wanted. Well, let me tell you what they were doing in my house. They were walking around the house. The last place they stopped at was the living room. And they were standing there whispering to each other and pointing. What were they doing? They were trying to figure out if the furniture fit. Which if that's not a buying sign, I don't know what is. And the larger room was enclosed, so you could walk through the living room and walk around to the kitchen. The kitchen had an eat-in. I had an eat-in kitchen that was bigger than the dining room. Which I guess makes sense.
Yeah, you don't know.
If you have a lot of kids, it makes sense. And I would have taken them in there and set them down. Because if I said, you want to go over and sit down, we can discuss the home, you really seem that you like it, I want to make sure that you got all your questions answered. If they'll go to that kitchen table and sit down, what'd they just do?
They close it.
You got about a 90% chance
They owned it.
they're gonna buy that house, or at least try to. But, you know, if you're on your cell phone, you can't have it. And you know what, whatever's going on, like I say, unless it's a catastrophe about a closing, or it's a family member that, you know, there's a major problem, there's no reason for you to be on that stupid phone. Chapter 7, page, bottom of 145.
Civil Rights Act?
Civil Rights Act of 1866. Is that the same as the Fair Housing Act?
No.
Fair Housing Act was the act that occurred in what year? 68. 1968. Because the Civil Rights Act of 1866 allows discrimination on what basis?
Race.
None. When it comes to race, there is no circumstance that you can discriminate. Any kind of real estate. Doesn't have to be housing. It's the only one of the protected classes that covers everything. But it only deals with one protected class. And what's that? Right. So in any situation that we talk about where there may be an exemption as far as you being able to technically discriminate, the one thing we know would not be in that scenario would be
Race.
race. Page 150. Steering, block busting, red line. Which one would be a listing violation? No. Block busting. Steering is a buyer violation. I'm directing you towards or away from a particular property or community because of who lives there.
Could you repeat the question?
Question was, which of the following, which of these three would be a listing violation? And that would be blockbusting. Because that's what you're doing. You're busting up the block by convincing bigots that they should sell and get out before it's too late. I want to get news for you. Works like a charm. All you have to find is a place where everybody hates everybody. And you could, you know, move a family in that's of a different group, It's great. And then you move them out,
That's right.
and you bring everybody back in. So you make all kinds of money.
Yeah.
But see, I don't let them buy something new anywhere else. I have them rent until I get rid of everybody, and then I sell it back. Like I said, it works like a charm. Unfortunately, or fortunately, it's illegal. But steering is exactly what it sounds like. You're steering, you're directing them in one way or the other. And it can be based upon what you think they want or what they tell you they want. But if they want to live in an area with people with the like background that they have, can't do that. If that's that important, they need to go find out and come back and tell me where to show them property. Now, by the way, they have local fair housing offices. And they're not nice. No. So when they ask you about steering, blockbusters, or redlining, which one are you gonna answer? Why? Because it has a star. On page 154. If I told you one of the three has a star, and stars mean something on the chest,
Yeah, it's gonna be blockbusters.
make sure your pets are blockbusters, or steering or redlining. Yeah, maybe I'm gonna trick you. Maybe they're not really the stars. So we're at the bottom of 154, where it says that TLSA.
Elsa.
ILSA. Oh, okay. And who administers that? Okay, you read good.
So,
That's the answer.
Yeah.
so what?
They're gonna talk about the Interstate Land Sales Full Disclosure Act, and then they're gonna ask who administers it.
Who administers it? Commissioner Financial.
I'm hopeless.
On 156, we go into the Florida Residential Landlord and Tenant Act. We know that there's three ways in which they can hold this money. They can put it in a non-interest bearing account. They can put it in an interest bearing account and pay a percentage of that to the tenant. Or they can post a bond of $50,000 and actually take the money and use it.
Whoa.
What's the most important word in this little discussion?
Management?
It has to be about everything.
The deposit.
Immediate.
Set for us.
Florida.
Oh,
Florida.
You don't do that.
Those accounts have to be in Florida.
Florida.
so that's the answer.
So the answer is the account in Florida?
Probably.
But what was the question?
On the test.
Asking for I don't understand. I don't understand.
Don't
So
understand what?
what you just said, the account in Florida, what was the question that pertaining to that?
Those escrow accounts must be in the Florida.
It doesn't have to be escrow, it could be a personal account.
Personal account, though? Okay.
the common thread throughout the whole thing is, if it's in an account, it has to be in Florida. One 58. At the end of a lease, the landlord has to make a decision. Are they gonna lay a claim on any of the security deposit because they feel there was damage? Or are they gonna return it? If they're going to return it, 15 days. If they're gonna lay a claim on it, they have 30. But it would make sense, if they're gonna lay a claim on it, they would normally give more time than if they're just gonna return it. If there's not, if they're just gonna return it, cut the check and send it back. $167. I have a lot that borders water, and specifically running water or flowing water. What kind of rights do I have? Riparian. If I had said it was a lake, sea, or an ocean, Victoria. Somehow I like riparian better.
Can you repeat that again? What's
Look on page 167. If it's running water or flowing water, that's riparian. When it's, lack of a better word, standing water, ocean, sea, or lake, that would be littoral. Yeah, at the moment, riparian is a good term.
So 1 to 13 is where I would start.
Uh-huh.
Page 175.
No, 167.
How about 169?
So we have 1 to 13.
Okay, you don't have to start. 170?
175 is the next one.
At the bottom of the page, we talked about the basic tribal rights, but that wasn't started.
172, line 10.
Wait. What happened to Irma, page 169?
Highlight.
We have a star.
I thought-
Yeah, but he skipped a lot of stuff. You're supposed to highlight it.
Yeah, I got it right. Let's go back to 169 for a second.
Okay.
Irma is the scenarios that the courts would use in deciding whether something was a fixture or personal property. What about recessed lighting? Would that be considered a fixture or personal
Yeah.
property? Like this? Okay. How about a washer or dryer?
Personal.
Unless the contract says otherwise. How about an area rug?
Personal.
Why?
Because you can pick it up and take it.
Cause of degree or amount of attachment. A wall-to-wall carpet is attached. So wall-to-wall carpet, generally speaking, is gonna be considered a fixture. Whereas an area rug, which can be rolled up and taken out with no damage to the real property, is a fixture. See, there's no reason that you can't answer the question to this area. If you have bought or sold a place or rented a place, you've dealt with all this.
So it would be a star, huh?
Yeah.
Which one?
Yeah. Life estate. It's for how long? The life of who? Of the life estate holder or the person that gave it to them? No. If you give me a life estate, how long do I have it for? My life. Which is why you have to have fee simple to give me a life estate. Because all you have is a life estate, that's all you can give me. If you have fee simple, you can give me fee simple, but you can also give me a life estate. I don't have to give away all of my rights. I can just give away part of it. Or until you choke. I have an estate owned by two people. What type of estate would it normally be considered to be?
Joint tenancy.
It would not be joint tenancy, because you know that joint tenancy has to say it has the right of survivorship. I didn't say anything about right of survivorship, so it cannot be a joint tenancy. Tenancy in common, because it can't be tenancy by the inherities. Why? There was only one person. What kind of estate is it? If it was one person, what would the estate be?
Several.
A estate and several. Can there be someone named after the termination of the life estate to take over the estate? The answer is yes. They're referred to as probation. What if there's no one named to receive the property upon the death of the life estate holder? Then it goes back to the original owner. Or their estate if they don't happen to be alive. What we just did was at the top of page 175. The first paragraph is tenancy in common, the second paragraph is joint tenancy.
Do we understand?
And in joint tenancy, it talks about the right of survivorship. You have to understand, people, that a lot of times to be able to deal with the question, you can't just read the one sentence I may have highlighted. You have to read the whole paragraph. Because then you'll have to take out one sentence out of context.
Dale,
178, what?
before you move on page 175, where exactly is the star, which lines?
The right of survivorship under joint tenancy.
13.
On 178, 179, it talks about condos. And it lists the different documents if it's a developer How much time do they have to cancel?
15 days.
15 days, calendar or business? Calendar. If it's a resale, which is what we deal with, it's 3 business days. What a gift for sitting down.
Page 179, your end.
Questions on that? Questions? All right. 188? Page 188.
You're not gonna talk about the star on page 179, the operating budget?
Estimated operation.
Oh. The disclosure contract, no,
Which line?
I wanna know
Just
I have a spelling.
that.
Done.
I don't have a star.
No, I think the star,
The estimated operating budget. Oh, yeah, I have a star.
I don't see the scope.
On the estimated operating budget.
there's only one question.
Oh.
Oh. Is that a thing? That's a test? Hi, you have it.
Well, I'm gonna send out the room.
Just gonna review, that's all.
Yeah, I'm accessing the cameras on first.
Knock yourself out.
Come over and get it. And all of us would end up having to take over the stuff because it's on tape.
Somebody walk behind them, take a
Want to see
picture.
my vintage alley?
The star is actually
Smaller,
number
but
10.
Since you wanted to be outlandish.
Can you repeat that?
Mine, where it says frequently asked questions,
Oh.
answers. 379. Go to 179 and I'll explain it.
179?
Not good hospital. Not good for my blood pressure or your grade.
I can't dread.
Imagine standing up here doing this for 40 years. And I still am somewhat sane.
That was one.
The meaning of insanity.
Number 10, okay.
they're asking you which of the following is the prospective buyer expected to receive in regard to the dock. Well, there's a whole list of them there. I put a star beside one of them. Because 3 of the answers are not going to be any of those 5. You can figure out which is them. And if you can't, it's not my problem. All right, let's go to 188. On 188, at the bottom of the page, under the discussion of wills, there's a term, it's near the end of line 39, it says, a gift of real property is a device, and the recipient of the gift is the devisee. That is a start. 188.
Yeah, on the bottom.
So what question did you ask?
Well, there's only 2 possible questions that can be asked here. Either they give you the term and one of the 4 answers is the definition, or they give you the definition and one of the 4 answers is the term.
Okay.
That's usually the way vocabulary tests work.
192.
Okay, actually 192 to the top of 193. Which policy, when it comes to title insurance, is transferable? The owners or the lenders?
Lenders.
And the reason for that is the mortgage value is normally going down, whereas the value of the property is normally going up.
That's the,
Plus, all the lender has to worry about is what happened up until the time they started. As the owner, I'm concerned about what may happen in the future.
So where's this from?
190.
Word on, and probably the easiest is 193.
Wait a minute, 192 is from 34 to 46?
Now, everybody listen. The easiest way to remember the answer to the question about transferability is using the chart at the top of page 193. If you read the 2 paragraphs at the bottom of 192, it would tell you the same thing. But I like these little figures because it allows me to make a contrast between the 2 of them without having to reading 4 or 5 pages.
Yeah.
91 the bottom.
194. In order for title to pass from one person to another,
voluntary delivery.
what has to happen? Voluntary delivery and acceptance. Is the word voluntary important?
Yes.
I would assume that it is, since it would be there if it wasn't important. Which covenant in the deed says that I certify that I am the owner of the property and or have the right to convey that property?
To having to hold the same.
Nope, that's telling me whether it's fee simple or not.
Right.
The covenant of seizure, I'm seized of it. If I'm seized of it, it's mine.
Where's that at?
That's at the bottom of 196.
Oh, that's why.
It's not even in the front page. When did you move on?
Oh, I didn't know.
199.
Okay.
That's the way I remember. When you see something, it's mine.
Seize the moment.
If it's mine, I can give it to you. And what that's saying is, it's a covenant, so I'm promising I'm the owner, and I'm promising I have the right to make. I may not necessarily be the owner. I may have a power of attorney. But I am saying that I have the right to convey that property. All right. 199. 199 is the paragraph that talks about eminent domain. What allows them to enforce eminent domain? Condemnation. Because if they come to you and say, we're buying your property because we're building 95 through your front door, and you say, no, you're not, they can take court action called condemnation, as long as they can show that it's being done for the good of the public, and you're paid a fair market value for the property, you're gone.
That's great.
It's called a democracy.
What if I own a farm?
Huh?
What if I own a farm and I've had it for 200 years and they're
Yeah.
They don't care.
care.
like, well, I'm sure if you had a farm,
You're gonna take the bullet for a better cause.
Depends on what the problem is.
Well, like, I got cattle, give me 3.8.
Two and two.
202. Guys, so far you've been good about the chit chatter. It's starting to crank up. I have no patience for it tonight. If you want to talk, go outside. If you have a question, ask me. So we don't have 8 people asking 8 other people the same stupid question. Because if you're not talking about the stars, you shouldn't be talking. That's it. At the bottom of 202, you have a math problem. The math problem is extremely complicated. It tells you that your rent is based on 2 things. A fixed amount of rent, so you know the answer, if that fixed amount of rent is $2,000 per month, I know the answer has to be more than $2,000. Because then it tells me what the gross rent is, or the gross sales. And then they will give you a point where anything above that number, you pay a percentage, say 3%. So I have to figure out that this is what? 50,000. So now my rent is calculated on 2 things. The 2,000 plus 3% of they give you a gross amount and say any amount over that number, you pay an additional 3% in rent. So you're looking at what, 1,500? From here, 2,000 from there. But if you think about it, it makes sense. If they give you a flat amount of rent and then tell you that if the gross sales go above a certain number, you pay 3% on that number, where's the difficulty?
It's 2,000 by 12, I mean, just not to confuse.
Well, it depends on whether they're asking me monthly or annual.
Yeah, but annual sales or whatever.
Now, this problem here, they gave you everything monthly and then asked you annual. Let's see, if I get my rent of $3,500 a month, how do I get it to annual? Why? Oh, no, you sure it's not 11? I know where I come from, it's 11. Do I sound like you? That can't be that way, that's not the way we do it But, any way you want to. Class starts middle of January. Two oh six. Which one you said? Yep. I have a start on 206. Would you like to know where it is? Yeah. Shut up. They talk about superior liens versus junior liens. The question's going to ask you which of the following is a junior lien. And which one are you going to mark? Income tax.
Junior?
Yeah, that's what it says. Which means that your IRS tax lien becomes effective the day it's recorded, like most other junior liens.
Superior is the federal.
Superior, the two I pick up right off are taxes and special assessment. And they'll ask you about the income tax lien, because everybody thinks that goes right to the top. No, it doesn't go right to the top. Okay?
So what do you have this one?
Huh?
Income tax.
Just to substitute.
What?
Junior, that was his income.
What about it?
Which is it, income tax, IRS or the?
IRS. The fact that it's a junior lien. I've just made a decision. Next class, there will not be a one sentence or a one word start.
Oh. 18.
Because all you're doing is focusing on that start, not on material around it. So if they ask the question the wrong way, you're not going to recognize
She
it.
speaks for all of us.
Okay. Let's go to. How about 260?
How many questions on this section?
40. Yes, I like to go that too.
He's saying one by one.
3?
See, if we don't get through everything by 9:30, it's not a problem for me. I'm going home at 9:30. So you can decide if you want to chit chat until 9:30 gets here, and then we can go home. Now, I'm going to deal with several questions at once here. What's that? What is that?
Point of origin.
It's a black dot.
When you ask questions, it's like you don't know how to answer.
One of those two lines. What's this?
Principal meridian.
And?
Baseline.
Okay. Which one divides the north from the south?
The baseline. No.
The baseline.
divides the north from the south?
Yes.
What divides the east from the west?
The
The principal
Well, it's gotta be the other answer.
Yeah.
See, this is a game here where if you get one side right, you automatically get the other side right. If you get one side wrong,
You get the.
you automatically get the other side wrong.
So all you need to know is one. The other one just falls into place.
Now, we know that this thing is a grid. What are the spaces? What is this called?
Rangers?
A range. Which range is it?
Which one?
This one here.
Northwest.
R4.
West.
North. 1, 2, 3, 4. R4 west.
R2.
R4.
Let's see, it's 1,
West.
2, 3,
Four.
4 vertical strips from the principal meridian.
Yes.
West.
4.
So obviously you have not learned those two statements I said you had to learn if you want to be able to do this. And now you can see that unless you've learned that, which you haven't, you can't do this. So keep that in mind as you study this. Well, obviously it's 4 vertical spaces. See, that's the key word. Ranges are verticals, tiers are horizontal. So that's 4 what?
West.
West.
West. It's either north, south, east, or west. In this case, it's west. West of what?
On principal.
Of the principal meridian.
Why did you put east?
No, it's east. Yeah, it's just,
Just wait to see if you'll pay attention.
yes, they do.
Okay, what's this space right here?
Yes.
Well, we know it's tier, and we know it's south,
Why is that?
because it's south of the baseline. And it's 1, 2, 3.
Start worrying about that
So-
after you see.
North of the baseline is ranges.
No,
No, she said that.
It's the same thing, it's just that north is going from the baseline.
everything vertical is a range. And it's either east of the principal meridian, or it is west of the principal meridian. But ranges are always vertical. There's no time where it wouldn't be vertical. So anything about a range is vertical. That's why the dividing line is the baseline, is the principal meridian. And because it's vertical, that's west of it, that's east of it. So this one would be range 4 east. Again, 1, 2, 3.
Four-ish.
No, it should be 3.
Or 3.
Yeah, because this one is 1, 2,
Yeah.
3. In this case, east. No, that's not one. I should have made it one, because every time I do it, it confuses me. What's that square called? What's it called?
No, it's a
36.
sector.
It is a township, and it is 6 miles
By 6
by 6
miles.
miles. Within that township, there are how many parts? 36, and they're called sections. They start in the northeast corner and work their way around Snake Path. 6 on each level. Now, every township looks like that, in theory. So how do I know which one that one is versus this one? How do I identify one of these squares from all the rest of them?
By the location.
By two things,
Their number.
the township and the range.
Yes.
I guess maybe between now and Monday, you will read those statements I gave you. Because obviously you haven't spent much time with them. And I warned you that they were the key to making this easy. I didn't tell you it was also the key for making it difficult. Now, the tier always comes first. So what tier is that?
3.
Well, I gotta go back here to make that decision. 1, 2, 3. So it's tier 3, and I'm south of the baseline. Now, the other side of the coin, it is in range 1, because that's the principal meridian. In this case, east. If it's vertical, it can't be south, north and south. It's either east or west.
And this is on a flat.
On 222, you have a star for calculating the
Okay, so it's a zero star.
acres. Now remember this, the directions don't help you to count the number of acres. You start with the section. No matter what section it is, you start with the section. And then you go from right to left.
Dale,
Yes,
I apologize, but from page 206, I didn't get which one, we went through the diagram, but which one is the star?
269.
what's a star?
Yeah.
It's on the board, and the two set of notes I gave you.
From left to right, yeah.
Because in the future, the star are gonna be those two statements. And there'll be no other stars on your government survey. Because you have to see the big picture, or the little parts don't fit.
So can I just ask a question about that real quick?
Yep.
So the numbers you put are basically
Which number?
in there, the tier 3 south,
Right.
the R.
That is helping me. See, you got 6 mile squares all over the state. There has to be a way of identifying one in Del Rey versus one in Boca. They're all set up the same way. They're all numbered the same way. So the only way we can figure out where this square is where it intersects. Because the only place that these two intersect is here. You move up there, it's not the same two. You move over here, it's not the same two.
So what the numbers are saying to me is that,
This, it's telling me where it is. It's in Township 3 South, which means it's in here, and it intersects Range 1 East there. Therefore, its identification is Tier 3 South, Range 1 East. There is no other square on the board that would have those two characteristics. Because it's the only, because what I'm looking at is what range and tier are intersecting. Well, in this example, Tier 3 South is intersecting with Range 1 East to create that square. It's a grid.
right, but within that small
Within this,
square.
and with this,
Right,
now it's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9,
okay,
10.
all right, I just, okay. Now I got it.
Got it? Okay. Yeah.
You said, I thought you said you find the township and then you, the section and you move it, you did the calculation of right, left. Okay.
So you start with the word section, which is on the right-hand side.
Anything that we.
And I get 30 days.
Like everything's all jumping
together now.
I think here, is not a start,
Cuando formulé las preguntas, yo creo que la comisión es saber leerlo. Es decir, esto no es la
3 nights.
Sí, pero es que este es fácil.
Oh, just 80, you got my back.
And he has said, pero sí tengo amigas que me han dicho que no es
With this map, the rising, multiplying,
When I came here, I thought it was talking about this was talking about the and I was so confused because if we're following this, it should be on here, not
you're dividing what's up, you minus something wrong and it's coming up.
yes, yes.
I did this.
Is that the last one?
I find the answer.
Actually, no, he said that's not part of it. Some people have to start from the list, that's not. It's the,
Line 4 and 5 and
6.
Yeah.
Of the crop.
what you want to know, behind the word.
25.5 by parent, that's the price. So it's very easy because when you do another one, you kind of divide it, you would choose the common will choose positions here. And it becomes 5 or something like yeah, if you are 100, 0.5 means that you have to go up to 1.9. But you have to always divide by 7. Let's see if you have 1.5, whatever, you go up 1.
Because it's a one, it's a long amount, one, and after additional
You bought a house, right? Or this amount?
This one.
You give me the deposit of something. Okay, so you know that the price, what triggers this is the price of the house, right? It is all the time. So this is the price, so you go by this price by 0.7.
Started a new job.
Then you have a deposit, this amount of money, so you know that the loan is this amount less this amount. So if you pay a mortgage, a tax of the mortgage, and then
Normally,
right? So, you have a and a loan of 20,000, right? What is this? This minus this. Okay. Yes, you're right. Yeah, that's right. That's the entire loan. The entire loan. And it doesn't matter.
And then I said, well, just take this because, and
The only
then
thing that has to be
I get out at 5, like,
the hospital called back to
is
say.
the mortgage, right?
When you went, on the medical
No, this
This plus this, is this
I'm
not
only gonna
this?
change my
Okay? But this one is different, it says, it is this, 20,000. So you know what? Goes by 0.0002. And the other one, the law, is for the complete, is for the complete law. The assume plus the new one. And you're not gonna assume plus the new one. Goes this one plus 20. And after, you have to pay 1,000. Is for new or old? No, because it's assumed and the new so this way, you do the do you want to see?
No, I know.
Okay. Yeah. This is a new.
Well, that's what she's doing.
So the deductible goes everybody, right?
She, building is not
And the other side goes by the confusion also. Assume plus the new one. And you know that it's 5, 0.45, then you have to divide by.
Can't really do anything.
Yes. So this one is.
Just, you have 10%, try to keep it a good guy. Try to put him off.
Yeah, the other one, with the division. I hope they have a diagram when they ask questions, because then that'll help. Because if they don't have a diagram.
The first company was called Live Online.
The money is free
Until her services became
but also, the original amount that you pay.
some of them are stabilized, and down to one disabled. She should just on just finish 5 years of that, she's the one that he's saying. So we got to go stuck in New York now. The sequel is
You know, it's a very transition.
So my problem is like, I know but I wish it was how do I? You know what I'm saying, how do I get to that point? That's where I get lost.
32.
Excuse me? 222?
Where are we at?
The last thing we did was the, everybody okay with the calculating of the size of the section? I don't know. Now let's try 232.
There's a star.
Oh, that's just because I wanted to do it for practice.
Right, wasn't there a star in 222?
Yeah, I just wanted to do it for practice.
That's what I thought.
On 232,
What about 222?
what about it?
Is there a star?
Yes, it's a star.
Is that 222 right there? You got your hand on?
Calculation, this is calculation.
Is that 222 that you got your hand on? Okay. There, on the right side, right?
Yeah, that's
This left side, but on the left side.
Yeah. On 222, the section that talks about calculating size,
Yeah.
that's the start. Then I suggested that you work problem 15 on 223 for practice.
Oh.
Dale, is there anywhere online that, like a tutorial for the math?
No. Two 32. Are we okay with that? Worry about the other 90 points. On 232, we talked about the statute of frauds. If I have a 6-month listing, in order for it to be enforceable, does it have to be in writing inside?
No.
Yes.
Absolutely not, because it says in your notes, listing agreements for more than a year.
What was it placed on?
I haven't yet.
By now?
You said it the last time.
Any listing less than 1 year or less, not to have to be in writing to be enforceable. If you took a 3-year listing, in order for it to be enforceable
Yes,
under the
it has
statute
to
of
be.
frauds,
Yes.
it would have to be in writing inside.
After 1 year.
For more than a year.
Right. What type of contracts fall under the statute of frauds from the standpoint of they have to be in writing and signed. I want to know type of contracts, not examples.
Purchase, sale, option, contract.
Those are examples, I don't want examples. Contracts that transfer an interest in real property have to be in writing and signed to be enforceable. Does a deed have to be in writing and signed?
Yes.
Why? Because it transfers an interest in real property. If I have a 2-year lease, does it have to be in writing and signed? Yes. You'll notice also in line 9, actually 8, talks about what's an enforceable contract. It says, is a legally binding contract that the courts will recognize. So if the courts won't recognize the format of your contract, it's not enforceable. Did I give you a star on 232, or 233, excuse me?
Yes.
Yes.
Avoidable, okay.
Executory contract.
Haven't got there. What's a void contract?
Something like that.
It's missing some of the elements.
Missing elements.
Voidable contract,
That it can be,
it can be terminated by either party to the transaction.
Terminated. By either or terminated by either party.
Page 235. I have a contract that has been signed and initialed by all parties. Is it an executed contract or an executory contract?
Executory.
It is an executory contract because it has not yet been performed. Closing would be an example of when it is now executed. $238. Under remedies for breach, number 4, which is line 24, talks about compensatory damages. To be more specific, it would be lines 25, 26. Where it says that usually the party bringing suit seeks an amount of money equal to the extent of loss suffered. Okay. I have a listing agreement where the seller has the right to sell the property without paying a commission. What kind of listing is it? Open, exclusive agency, or exclusive right of sale? Exclusive, because an exclusive right of sale means that whoever sells it, when it sells, I'm entitled to commission. I'm on 240. There we talked about the open, the exclusive agency, and the exclusive right of sale. But the big difference between the two exclusives is one, the seller can sell it themselves without owing the commission, and the other is the broker's entitled to commission no matter who sells it. Two, 4, 5. In order to sign for someone else, for example, to sign a sales contract, I would have to be given, and which makes me
Attorney back.
an attorney in fact. Yep. Yes. The star starts at the bottom of the page, line 19.
Okay, which page?
247. Starting with line 19, going to the next page. To line 8. Star, as far as those bullets are concerned, would be the first bullet on page 248. Page 260. The star is at the bottom of page 261. It's the term, I'm sorry, 260. It's the term hypothecation, which means you pledge something as security without delivering possession of it. That would be your house and the mortgage that's hanging on it.
Without security.
Is hypothecation the same as collateral?
No, because collateral could be actually given. You want to borrow money from me, give me your necklace. That wouldn't be hypothecation. But signing a mortgage and note and giving it to the lender that says you can take my house if I don't pay is hypothecation.
Oh, that's fine.
So that's what happens in a lien theory state. In a title theory state, the lender winds up with the deed to the property until the property is, the mortgage is closed.
And we're in a lien theory, right?
Yes. Let's try it this way. Do you own a home here? She owns a home here. Do you have the deed to your property? That means the bank doesn't. So all the bank would have is a lien.
Okay.
And the set of Florida.
Yeah, that's the only state I care about right at the moment. But yeah, you're right, it's not the same. Majority of states are lien. From 264, what that first
Mortgage features, binding. Five to nine. And then 14, 341.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
They're not the same as the home.
I'm sorry, dear, what is it on 264?
Loan to value.
Loan to value ratio. And then if you flip over to 266, you actually have an example of the calculation of the loan to value ratio. In order to calculate your loan to value ratio, what do you have to know?
Yeah, there's always borrowed.
On the purchase price, on the purchase price. That's what I'm talking about.
Let's see, when I look at the formula there, it says loan to value ratio. Now I know if my answer is gonna be a ratio, the last step's gonna be division. And the two components of that division step are gonna be the loan and the value. Which one's on top?
Well,
Why? Because it's the first one. I pretend that the dash or the 2 is a division symbol. So then it's loan divided by value equals loan to value ratio. This one's too easy. You'll find some way of making it difficult. And it is pretty bad when they actually give you the formula in the question.
Oh, they do?
Well, let me ask you a stupid question. If they ask you, what is the loan to value ratio, what are you gonna do? You're gonna take the loan and divide it by the value to get your answer. Make sure you don't run into the trees while you're looking for the forest. Or not run into the forest while you're looking for the trees.
So Monday we bring in the calculators and all that?
Yeah.
All that.
A base.
That's the only thing you can bring.
Oh, okay.
$1
Okay, bring your
calculator.
book.
You need a calculator and a pen or pencil. Everything else stays in the car. Don't bring any books in here on Monday night. You don't need scratch paper. You can't do the math anyhow, so what do you need scratch paper?
Right?
I love how he does it with.
According to what you're telling me, you don't have to do math, so why the hell do you need scratch paper? Yes. The back of each page of the test, which is 18 pages long, is blank. Is 18 pages enough scratch paper for? Okay.
Do we bring our own
It's
calculator?
really only.
Yeah,
Yes.
but $1.
If you want to use mine, it's $50 an hour.
Can we use your brain?
Yeah.
I'm not so sure that you, there's a lot of messy stuff up there, so.
Dark side.
Comment.
On 267 at the bottom of the page, they talk about the assignment of a mortgage. This is that transfer from the primary market to the secondary market, where that lender takes that mortgage and note and sells it to an investor. That's assigning. Assigning something means you transfer your rights in that to someone else. On 269,
So, assignment is the primary to the secondary market?
yes, when mortgages are sold in the secondary market. We're now on page 269. Where it talks about contract for deed. In a contract for deed, does the buyer initially get the deed to the property?
Yes.
Answer is no, they get a contract for the deed. When do they get the deed? When they pay off the contract.
It's that. on that one?
You have
No, that was part of the previous page, where the stars will be on the previous page. Okay, 13?
Wait.
280 and 281. In order to work the amortization problem, well, first a question. How do I recognize that the question's asking me to do this chart that we did? I mean, the chart's easy to do, but a lot of times the problem I hear students have is it's not doing the problem, it's recognizing that that's the problem I'm supposed to do. Because the type of information that's in here, there could be several different things they might ask you to do. How do you know it's the one where we set up the chart? If they ask you about a specific month, like they said, please calculate the interest portion of the third month's payment. Or please calculate the balance after the second month's payment. Anything where they're talking about the interest, the principal, the balance, and they want to know that for a given year, you always set it up this way. The balance, the payment,
The interest,
the interest,
the principal,
principal,
and then bond.
and the balance.
Do you have balance twice?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay.
because you have a balance before you pay, and then you have a smaller balance after you
Oh,
pay.
yeah,
Now, what do they have to tell me in order to work this problem? They have to tell you the interest rate, not the interest rate, which will help me find the interest.
The principal balance.
The principal balance
Yes.
and
The payment.
the payment. When I work this problem, do I work it from top to bottom or bottom to top? Okay. What's the, so you're telling me that I'll just throw some numbers
The
in here.
payment doesn't change.
That's what I borrowed. How long will that stay 30,000? One payment. Why did I just do that? Because it's a fully amortized loan, therefore you pay the same payment every month. Now, this is what I know starting the question. Regardless, it doesn't matter. This is what you know. So what's the first thing I figure out? The interest. No, I got the rate. I need the interest. So this is one. Once I know the interest, what do I do? I subtract it from the payment to get the principal. Once I know the principal, what do I do? I subtract it from the balance to get the new balance. That new balance then does what? Starts out amount 2. No matter how they set up the problem, they have to tell you those 3 things. no matter what they ask you, the chart always works. They're gonna ask you one of these three for a given month. So really, the important part of it is getting the chart. Once I got the chart set up, it's simply a matter of following through. I work from top to bottom. And whatever I get at bottom now becomes the new balance for the next month. This problem is not difficult. But it has, if you had to do the principal balance at the end of the third month, you gotta do the same step 3 times. Right. Okay. Let's go to 282. Let's go down to the bottom of the page where they talk about the adjustable rate mortgage. And the key is understanding the two parts are the index and the margin. Which one represents the recovery of cost and profit for the lender?
The market.
The margin. So the star is actually the 3 lines where it talks about the margin. Okay, the next one I have is 288. Does VA make loans?
Yes.
No, they guarantee loans. Who makes loans? VA approved the lenders. Does VA guarantee or insure?
Guarantee.
What's the maximum guarantee?
417.
104,250. It's on line 6.
Is there a star on that?
Yes.
What's the maximum loan amount under VA? There is none.
417.
The maximum is not the loan amount. The maximum is the maximum guarantee amount. You could buy $1 million house with VA. But once you get over 417,000, you're gonna have to put down 25% of the difference, which means it would make sense to go VA. You lose so much. You lose all the benefit of it.
So wait for star.
I don't understand the 25%.
VA, when you look at the maximum loan you can get, no money down with VA, is 417. Now, of that 417, might be true, I haven't seen it. It'll probably end up being a little low. Anything that has changed, that's now going to be in the next edition, they have a tendency to take that information out of the test until the new stuff gets filtered in. And they give us like 6 months or so to get the message out. Sad part is, 6 months after that, they change it again. Okay, what are we doing? Oh, back to that. So if I borrow 417,000 because I have full entitlement, if I defaulted the next day, the lender's maximum risk is 75%. Because 25% of 417
About the 107.
is the 104,250. But once you go over 417, then 25% of that is more than 104,250. Now you're gonna have to put some money down to get it back. The whole deal is their risk is never more than 75%.
Thank you.
Okay. 95. Okay. On 295, we talked about what Ginnie Mae's main function is, and that's to serve as a guarantor of the mortgage-backed securities. That's on 295. It is line 18.
Service and guarantor what?
Ginnie Mae?
Yeah, look at the one, look
That's
at
a
the,
guarantor of mortgage backup securities.
it's on 295, it's line 18. So when you talk about mortgage-backed securities, not Ginnie Mae and Marcus. On 299, under truth in lending, we talked about what they call the triggering terms that require full disclosure on the part of the lender. Simple rule of thumb, any example they give you that's a dollar or a percentage amount requires full disclosure. If they say to you low down payments,
It doesn't.
no problem. If they say 5% down and move in, that requires it. Interest rates as low as 4% would be a trigger term, which would require full disclosure. If you've ever seen ads where they've advertised interest rates, you always have that asterisk and then at the bottom an example. And when you hear the car ads, they do it, you just can't understand what they're saying. It's all that blah, 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 blah at the end of the, but that's what it is, it's this here. It's giving examples because of the fact that they talk about low down payment, Low down payment's not a problem. Easy credit, not a problem. Why?
Because it's the
Not a
same
dollar amount.
number and the same number.
We had a start on 298, Federal Reserve, and required disclosure.
Yeah.
You know, please a star, I don't have a star.
No star, I don't have a star, it's on 3 of 3. No. I'm back to it. Okay, page 320. And then go back to 312.
Oh.
320.
Back to 312. 312 is the commission problem. That one requires the ability to push buttons and read. So if you lack the skill of either one of those, this is gonna be a problem. The thing you have to watch with these kind of questions is them playing games with words. They give you the percentage split for the broker and ask you how much the sales associate's money is. So you gotta be careful to make sure that you're reading the question.
So we can concentrate on this sample.
Yeah. 330. I'm sorry, 320, sorry. What's the formula to do a proration?
Number of days.
7 days.
Rent paid for the closing month divided by number of days and closing. The number of days.
7 days.
That's the formula to work every proration. I don't care if it's a rent or taxes or anything.
Did you read what you wrote?
Yes. The left side is, first thing you do is take the item, the rent, the taxes, whatever, and divide it by the days in the month or year. Taxes would be annual, rent would be monthly. That will give you how much it costs on a daily basis. Then we have to figure out whether it's the buyer's days we're going to use or the seller's days. In rent, if we're closing on the 12th, and we know the day of closing goes to the buyer, is the buyer entitled to a majority of that rent?
Yes.
Well, if you're closing on the 12th, that means the first of the month, the seller collected the rent.
Yeah.
Yes, he is.
So you figure it's about a third of the year. That's the seller's money. I don't want to know the seller's money. I know that. Seller's already got all the money. What we have to figure out is how much the seller has to give up. Well, that's the part that belongs to the buyer, which is approximately 2/3 of the month in this example. So any answer that's anywhere near 2/3 of the total rent for the month, it's over. So I take the item, divide it by the days, to get the daily rate. Now, to figure out the days, so let's say we're doing May. Day closing we said was 5/12, which was on the buyer's side. Means the seller's last day is 11th. Now, what you have to be careful here is screw this up. You'll take 12 from 31 and be 1 day off. If you take 11, the last day of the seller to 31 gives you 20. And you can double check by saying, okay, the seller's days has been 11, that's right. So that means the buyer's entitled to 20 days of that rent. Why? Because the buyer's gonna own those 20 days. So this would be 20, and then it would be debit seller
Credit to the seller.
and credit buyer.
Credit.
Well, by the way, on the test, if you're not sure what the debit and credit are, go debit seller, credit buyer. In other words, you're just out and out guessing because you just can't figure it out, or you just don't remember. And you've got to guess. The good guess is debit seller, credit buyer. because more prorations are debit seller or credit buyer than the other way. So if I'm playing the odds, because I can't remember, at least my chance of getting it right went up a little bit.
So can you explain to me why 20 days if we're?
How many days does the buyer own this property in this month? 20 days. So would he not be
Because he
entitled
bought it
to
on the
20
12th?
days of the rent? Because we did day of closing of 12 of May.
So the 31st.
No.
Do you count the 12?
Who does the 12? Wait. Guys, have you ever heard the fact that I'm the teacher, and when somebody asks me a question, you'd be a little pissed off if I started answering when you were asking somebody a question?
The documents are being signed on the 12th?
Right.
Yeah, the day of closing belongs to the buyer.
So that's.
You want to remember how to remember that? You ready? Whose head will hit the pillow when it's nighttime of the day of closing? The buyer or the seller? If you bought a house today, you're gonna go home tonight, right? Which home you going to? The house you just bought. So your head will hit the pillow of that house, not the seller, because the seller gave you title today. That's the way I remember that the day of closing belongs to the buyer. Whose head's gonna hit the pillow at the end of the day of closing? The buyer. So it's the buyer's property. Anybody else? Okay. Where? I want to go to 324.
Can you repeat that S word that you just mentioned earlier?
Debit seller, credit buyer. If it's a debit to one, it's a credit to the other.
What page?
322, right?
324.
Yeah, the star is 20.
I know that we had all those pages, but the stars are on to 324. I didn't bother telling you that before, because I wanted you to study the whole thing. You're going to be asked two different questions. One's going to be to calculate the intangible tax on the new mortgage, and the other is going to be to calculate the note tax on the assumed mortgage.
What page are we on?
That's 324. And the other is the note star. And the other
On page 325,
Wait a minute.
No, the first one was calculating.
You combined two things, could you reiterate what I thought I heard?
yeah, the note tax, if you want to go back to the previous page to help you, the note tax and the intangible tax.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. On page 325 and 326, I had you highlight on 325 that the purchase price is a credit to the seller. That means it's gonna be what to the buyer?
Yes.
Everybody look at me. If the price is a credit to the seller, what is it to the buyer? Because I told you 2 seconds ago, if it's a debit to one, it's a credit to the other. Because if you're gonna enter both of them on the closing statement, they can't be both credits and they can't be both debits. So get one right, get both right. All right, chapter 15.
25, we had a, start on rules of thumbs.
No,
What, I'm sorry, what was it on
Chapter
325?
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
I'm sorry, what was it on 325?
Nothing.
On 326.
That's what he just talked about. But that's the buyer.
Page 340. It's 6 after.
Yep.
On 340, you have highlighted the definition of a household.
On page 340.
Everybody up to 340? Okay. Now let's go to 350. This is these impressions material. You haven't had 2 months, pretty good. All right, on 350, we talked about cost, price, and value. Which one represents what the consumer is willing to pay for a product?
Right.
Which represents what it costs for the product to be created?
Cost.
So price is what the consumer pays. Cost is what is spent to create it. I remember that because price starts with a P, so does paid. And cost starts with a C, so does create. Now, as a builder, which one do you want to be greater, cost or price?
Price.
Yeah, I'd like to be able to sell it for more than I
You want your cost.
cost for it created. Okay, that's complicated. At the bottom of the page, you should have a star beside of investment value. Who's the investment value about? The investor. So I would suggest that if you're looking, they're talking about investment value, I'd probably be looking for an answer that had the word investor in it someplace. Just a wild guess. Page 353. Bottom of the page. Assemblage and plottage. If putting 2 lots together makes them more valuable than individually, then we should be assembling them, and because they have plottage value.
So assemblage is 2 lots together.
Page 356. We did that reconciliation example underneath that chart. There's 4 steps to this. 3 of them are multiplication, 1 of them is addition. If they ask you to do this, what they will do is they will set up a scenario where they have 3 comps. They will tell you 2 things about each comp. How much its adjusted price is, and what percentage of the total value that comp represents, whether it's 50% or 30%, 40%. To actually come up with the estimated value, you take each one of those, take the adjusted price and multiply it by the percentage that they give you, and that gives you a number. You do it 2 more times, then you add those 3 numbers together, which is exactly what they did here, to get your answer. 360. On 360, they gave you an illustration of the steps of cost appreciation. We put a bracket around the first part of it. We started up where it said estimated reproduction cost, and we went down to total estimated reproduction cost of structure. We didn't go into the depreciation part.
Bless you.
What page are we on?
We're on to 360. It's a very simple problem, people. They're gonna give you the different components of the house. They will tell you the square footage and the cost per square footage for each one of those parts of the house. Again, you multiply those together. If it's 4 different parts of the house they give you, you'll get 4 different numbers. You add all those numbers up, and that gives you the current reproduction cost. Because the cost is normally calculated based upon a square foot. But they have to tell you everything. On page 361,
I have a question.
yes,
I wasn't here this day. I understand how you sum those square footage calculations. Do we not worry about depreciation, or is that?
because the question's not asking you about depreciation. The question is asking you to calculate the reproduction cost.
Got it, got it.
That's why I stopped it at that point.
Okay, makes sense, thank you.
You're welcome. Now, the next page answers the question you asked me. Because on the next page, they talk about the 3 types of accrued depreciation, which are physical deterioration, functional obsolescence, and external obsolescence. They have a start. What they do is they'll give you an example and want to know which one of the 3 it is. They may say you have a bad roof. That would be termites. Would be physical. How about a poor layout in the home? Functional. How about a street that had very little traffic but is now 2 lanes in each direction? Market conditions deteriorate. Well, market conditions would be what? Internal or external?
External.
You should check it. On page 363, the star is how you calculate the effective gross income.
How you calculate?
The effective gross income. You take potential gross income and subtract the vacancy and collection loss.
Subtract what?
Vacancy and collection loss. Add in other incomes, if applicable, and that will give you your effective gross income. So if they said to you the gross income was $100,000, the marketplace is showing a vacancy and collection loss of 2%. That's $2,000. So we're down to $98,000 as the effective gross income. And then they tell you there's $5,000 of additional income. We only did this twice, because we did it the other night too. And I took you all the way to the bottom. So how do I remember this? I practice writing it down. Of course, as far as money is concerned, as long as you get down to gross income, you'll be okay. Okay. Let's go to 368, 369. Gross rent multiplier and gross income multiplier. Which one typically uses monthly rent?
The rent, gross rent multiplier.
And which one typically uses annual income?
The gross income.
The gross income multiplier. And it says that
Wait, gross rent is rent and gross income is yearly? Monthly.
gross rent would be rent, yes, and rent's normally monthly. If you look on page 369, 16 through 20, basically the middle of 19 and 20, it says the GIM, which is the gross income multiplier, is basically the,
Refers to rent only.
GIM is typically, uses annual income, whereas gross rent multiplier. See, I think of the word rent, I think monthly. If I hear the word income, because when we did the chart and stuff, that was all annual income, and we used the word income. Only place we use rent is at the starting from top.
And what do you do with that multiplier?
Huh?
What do you do with the multiplier?
Multiply.
Makes sense.
Now, if I said to you the multiplier in this community is 100, what I'm telling you is, using this method, that properties are basically worth 100 times what they're rent for each month. It's a multiplier, so you're gonna multiply. That makes it hard. It's terrible when they give you the formula in the name. So I know that operating expenses wouldn't come into play with the multipliers. Why? Because it's gross. It's not net. I don't need expenses if I'm not going to net. Okay. 375, actually do 376. We have one star. We spent a little time talking about the terms, but you have one star. And that's equity. And that's whose money? That's the investor's money. In this chapter, they don't refer to them as buyers and sellers, they're investors.
What did you say, 276? Equity.
The word equity on line 30, and 31. Three 83. The question was, which one of these four valuations of businesses is unique to a business? The answer is liquidation analysis. Because if you look at the other three, they look like what we talked about in the whole chapter. Right. Okay, 18. On 391, we know that if the assessed value comes out and we don't feel it's fair, we have the right to protest it. There's 3 steps. You had step 1 starred. On 394, 395, we talked about the fact that in addition to the homestead tax exemption, there were some other additional exemptions that we were entitled to depending on certain factors. And we put a star beside the list at the bottom of page 394 and the top of 395. You got a surviving spouse, not remarried, blind person, totally, permanently disabled non-veteran, and totally and permanently disabled quadriplegic. You'll notice that everything but the veteran, the addition is always $500.
The addition is what?
Always $500.
Is 5,000 or 500?
I said everything but VA is 500.
Ah, okay.
For VA, just add a
I
zero.
got it. Yeah. Okay. Everything is 5,000.
Okay, next star, I think is on 399, when we did practice questions 10.
Question 10,
At the bottom of the page,
98.
399, excuse me, we talked about special assessments. Special assessments are not based on the value of the property, they're based on the cost of the assessment. On page 400, you have a sample problem. Another extremely complicated problem. The problem has started. On page 402, it talks about the deductions you can take for tax purposes. And we know we can do mortgage interest, we know we can do taxes, but we know we can't do what? Hazard or home insurance. On page 405, and the discussion, and again, here's where we did the PGI to CTO. But we talked about the fact that you can depreciate investment property. And there was a formula there for it. But then they told you that the economic lives are either 39 if it's non-residential, or 27.5 if it's residential. This is not a math problem. This is you being able to identify whether it's a residential or non-residential, and knowing whether to answer 27.5 or 39.
27.5 is residential.
So it's not a calculation, simply a matter of recognizing. $314.
314?
414. Yeah. In talking about the planning commission, we acknowledge the fact that they don't do anything other than what their name implies, which is plan. However, there are 3 areas where they have final authority. And those are subdivision plan approval, site plan approval, and sign control.
And what?
Sign control. It's on 414. Question. Would they have final authority when it comes to special exceptions?
No.
Yes or no? Why? Because it's not one of the 3 in the book. I can't believe that you couldn't answer that question. I just got through giving you the 3 things that they can have final authority, and then I asked you, does they have final authority for special exceptions? And you looked at me like you had no clue. I wasn't talking to you. If it's not applicable, I'm not talking to you. And it's usually not applicable to you. On page 415, you had that sample problem of calculating the number of acres.
God bless you.
And there's a number I have to remember to work this sucker. 43,560, the square feet in an acre. At the bottom of page 415, on line 19, you should have a star where it says zoning ordinances are local laws that implement the comprehensive plan. On 318, 418. The legally non-conforming use. That sounds like a use that's different than what the current use is. That's all right because the answer's in the name. And it hits the button. Okay, real quick, and I'll get you out of here. And I've got a minute. We made it. All right, first of all, thank you for being a part of this. And I look forward to the next phase, where we're making money. Now, Monday night, listen very carefully. Don't bring books in here. Stay in the car. Because I don't like seeing you study up to the last 30 seconds of class test starting. That's not good for the brain. You'll burn it. Remember this, you have to have a 70, not 100. Some of you seem to forget that. If you freak out over things that won't make a difference. Would everybody except the 70 go home right now?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, see, there's some in the room, no, I want my score.
Oh, no, we have until 9:30, right?
Huh? Yeah,
We have until 9:30, 10 o'clock, 11?
you have 3 hours.